Hi, this is Kevin Deal. Today we're going to talk about the minimalist design bullshit. I shouldn't use that, but I am going to, right? There are some manufacturers that use that term and they kind of toss it out there and they use it as an excuse to have fewer parts in the box and need to explain it because they are charging you more for less. And I don't dig that. I don't like people being taken advantage of. Now look. If you've got a lot of money and this doesn't matter to you, then who cares, right? But to me, money is money. $5,000 is $5,000. It's a lot of money to me. It's always been a lot of money to me, right? And it should be, I hope you feel the same way I do. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to take this $5,000 amp, it's just a little over $5,000. This one's a little over $5,000. I want to just compare them and show you. Now, I am not trying to pick on this amp. That's why we have obscured the brand. I don't want people out there to I don't want you to even say what it is. And I don't want to say that it is just this brand. You can take any product that you're considering buying, any tube integrated amp. I want you to put it into Google, the Hacky Sack 350. Put it into Google, go to images, and find a picture of it opened up so you can see inside, because that's where all the little secrets are, right? All the dirty laundry or just the little stuff you need to know about. And I'm going to show you how to notice the differences and what they really mean to you, okay? So please stay with me. This is important stuff. The first one I'm going to talk about is point-to-point wiring, right? That's just obvious, but people think about it being obvious because it sounds better. Well, yes, that's true. This PrimaLuna could sell for half what it sells for. It would sell for 50% less if it used a whole bunch of printed circuit boards in the signal path. It would be so much easier to make, so much easier to make. But they don't do that because they believe in it, because it gives it a soul. But it's a lot more than that. It also gives it longevity. If you take a tube, a hot vacuum tube, and mount it to a printed circuit board, it's going to transmit that heat to the board. And over a period of years, those boards can dry out, and you wiggle the tube a little bit, you get a crack across a trace. I mean, our service department deals with that problem here and there. Somebody comes in, something doesn't work, it's because of a broken trace. It happens. But it's not just that. I mean, and for that matter, look at this compared to this. Look at the tube sockets on this PrimaLuna. Look at them. They are ceramic, and they are mounted to these chimneys. And the chimneys are held on with 4 bolts, and the chimneys allow heat to get out of the inside of the amp, and it makes all the parts last longer. All the parts last longer. I mean, but it's so obvious if you compare the two that this costs a lot more money to build. But it's not just about that. It's about choices. When you have a printed circuit board and you're trying to lay it out, sometimes you got to make choices that you wouldn't normally want to do, like mounting this power supply capacitor right next to a tube socket. Capacitors don't like a lot of heat, right? They don't dig that. That's why they have a temperature rating on them. So if you mount it right next to a tube socket, that's not necessarily what I would want to do, but sometimes you are forced to do it. So instead of that, and let's look at this capacitor in this case. This is a Cornell Dublier capacitor. It's about last time I looked it up, they were about $9. Inflation, let's give it another $3, 30%. Let's call it a $13 capacitor, okay? That's it. It is an affordable entry-level capacitor that is soldered right to the printed circuit board. Let's compare that to the PrimaLuna. This is a big Nichicon capacitor made in Japan. And they have, oh my God, oh my God, I'm forgetting what they call them out. Well, you're going to tell me in the comments. I'm having a brain fart. So you have wires, big lugs on top. So you can hook wires directly to the top of the capacitor. And then this capacitor is involved with this choke and another capacitor. What is that called? It is called a pi circuit. This is a textbook way to get rid of high frequency noise and get rid of low frequency noise in your amplifier and make a really bitchin' power supply. The idea of a minimalist design in power supply is absolute fraud. I mean, look, you cannot power your way to better sound. Power doesn't mean anything to you. It doesn't mean better dynamics. It doesn't mean better bass. It means the ability to play louder. But if the noise floor goes up too, you're not getting anywhere. Think about when you have an air conditioner running in your sound room, right? And you have that noise coming out of the vents. We're trying to turn off the air conditioner. Dynamic range is the difference between light and dark and loud and soft. We want to increase the dynamic range by lowering the noise floor, and this is the way you do it. So if you ever look at other competitive products, see if they have a big capacitor and see if they have a choke and another cap. Something else you probably won't see, though, are these little capacitors mounted to the tops of the big ones. Those are called bypass caps, and they are there to get rid of high frequency hash, right? Low frequency hash, high frequency hash. Boom. Now you're dropping the noise floor. Oh my God, I love it. Now let's talk about something else that is really, really critically important, and you've got to know about this, and that is biasing a tube, okay? Bias, I want you to look at a tube. Look at this as almost like a carburetor, and you have to adjust the idle of the carburetor here and there, right? In fact, they even call it idle current. So if you've got 4 of these, they all have to be idling the same. This amplifier has 4 power tubes. The PrimaLuna here has 8 power tubes. It gives you so much more. But you have to keep them synchronized. Now, not just when the tubes are idling, but when you press on the gas. Think about it. When you're playing music and turning it up, how are those tubes going to react when they're playing music? And then most important is this. What's going to happen to these tubes when they age? In some amplifiers, you have the ability to adjust each tube. Look at the amp, download the owner's manual, and find out. Don't buy anything without finding out how you're going to take care of the care and feeding of the amp. Some amplifiers are going to have a little screw for each tube. It's actually pretty simple to do. This particular amplifier, once you set the tubes, it's supposed to keep them set because you got these 2 little boards here. Some amplifiers run what's called cathode bias, and there's no adjustments at all, and they will tell you it is automatic bias. That is a lie, and you got to be careful of that. So if the amplifier says it's auto bias, but they don't explain how, because they should be able to tell you, having a real auto bias is quite a feat. And if they don't explain it at all, then they are something called cathode bias. And what's the problem with cathode bias? Cathode bias works great. You don't have to make any adjustments. It always works great, right? The downside to it is this. About 1/3 of the power goes up in heat. So an amplifier that should be 50 watts per channel will suddenly be 30 watts per channel, right? Because they lose power. It's not an efficient way to do it. And many of those amplifiers are going to run in Class A operation. A 300B amplifier, and you're going to see those around, the great big 300B tubes, those are typically going to be cathode bias. That's not a big deal. That's how they roll, okay? It's not a big deal. 300B amps, cathode bias, running in Class A because they're a single-ended amp, that's fine. In an amplifier like this with multiple tubes, in what's called a push-pull amp, I don't dig Class A personally because, you know, you're going to end up with a shorter tube life. That's just the way it is. So what did PrimaLuna do? I mean, this was the thing that when PrimaLuna came to market in 2003, they wanted to solve that problem. And back then they came up with the very first adaptive auto bias on the market ever. And I remember those early boards because they were a little bit smaller. And I watched them breadboarding it and developing it over a period of years. And I've watched them continue to improve these boards over the years. Now we're at Rev like 5.1, I think, or something like that. And it is so cool because it does so many things. Tubes don't age evenly, right? So you've got one of these boards will control 4 tubes, and it's going to look at each of them and ask them how they're doing as you're playing music. And if one of them is giving a problem, it's going to work as hard as it can to make sure that you don't hear it. And that is especially important when you turn up music. It'll cut distortion by up to 50%, and it can give you an extended, usable tube life. But it's not just that. On some amplifiers, if a tube fails, it's going to break the amp. That's it, okay? It means they're going to have a sacrificial resistor, a sacrificial cathode resistor, and you got to get a technician to solder another one in. They'll sometimes put them on a little standoff. Some amplifiers are going to have what's called a plate fuse. And so if a tube fails, a fuse will blow, and then you have to guess which is the bad tube, and then you're going to pull it out, put it in another one, see if the fuse still blows, then put it in another one, see if the fuse still blows until you get the right one, okay? In a PrimaLuna, you have none of that, none of that. At the first sign of problems, this little relay opens up right here, and it cuts off the B+. So the amplifier is put into protection, and you are protecting all of these expensive parts. A little LED will light up in front of the bad tube. The tube may not even be bad. It might be that there was a burp in your electricity, conceivably. So what you would want to do is turn the amp off, swap that tube to the socket next door, turn the amp on, and play your music. If that same tube gives you a problem again, then you know you have a problem tube. Just replace it. You don't even have to replace it with the right tube. That's the beauty of this. Adaptive auto bias will allow you to use any tube in this amp, just about. And we've done it. It shows. We have run 8 different tubes in this amp at one time. A KT150, a KT120, KT90, KT88, 6550. 6L6GC, I mean a whole slew of different tubes at one time, and you'd never know it because the amplifier sounds great because of the engineering in this board. It works, and it makes the amp sound so much better. Oh my God. Now let's talk about that thing about power. Let's talk about tubes and life, right? Some amplifiers are going to run the tubes really, really hard. And I don't know how to advise you on that because manufacturers are going to not want to tell you how much plate voltage they're running and how hot they run the tubes. You know, there's amplifiers out there that are 100 watts per channel from just a pair of tubes, and they're running the bejesus out of them. In a PrimaLuna, there's 4 tubes in this amp, and it's only 70 watts per channel, because the tubes are running at their bare minimum to give you an extended life. We don't want to have something that's going to be a lot of problems. We want to give you an amplifier that you can use every day because it's designed that way. You shouldn't buy an amplifier, and I've had them before. I'm telling you, I used to have this one amplifier, oh my God, back in the 90s. It was crazy, and it shocked me too, by the way. I should say, one time. And that damn thing, every time I would turn it on, I go, I mean, that's just the way that I felt. And you shouldn't feel that way. And that's why I love PrimaLuna. And that's why I'm involved with this company. I knew what they were shooting for. Oh my God. So we got the bias thing, we got adaptive auto bias. So power doesn't mean anything. What is going to be important, right? What is going to be important? That's bandwidth. Bandwidth. And PrimaLuna has real bandwidth because they wind their own output transformers. Output transformers are half science and half voodoo. They're half art, but they are critical. They are the beginning and the end to a tube amplifier. This unit they buy stuff from a manufacturer, right? Almost everybody does. Typically, they're buying stuff off the shelf, period. They'll tell you they're getting them custom, whatever. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know. But PrimaLuna winds their own in-house. And I want to show you that. This is an output transformer from a PrimaLuna. It is massive. It is potted because it's a very expensive part. This is the single most expensive part in building a tube amplifier. And these have amazing bandwidth. Go read the reviews. See what John Atkinson says when he talks about the perfect square waves and that they are obviously a very, very high quality. Oh my gosh. But I want to talk to you for just a moment here. Let me think for just a second here. Did I talk to you about the power transformers? The power transformers are toroids, right? That's critical. So this is a PrimaLuna toroidal power transformer. It is a toroid. They are massive. Toroids take a lot more material than other transformers do, but they are the gold standard because they don't radiate noise into the signal path. I mean, that's a huge problem. So that's why they use a toroid, and that's why they are potted and then they're put into non-microphonic resin, and then they are put into this can to keep stuff inside so it doesn't leak out. But to make sure that this transformer is dead quiet, to make sure that there's no mechanical hum, they designed something that they invented called the AC offset killer. And that's what I'm talking about. The AC offset killer is charged to make sure that that transformer does not have mechanical hum that radiates into the room. Remember what I said about air conditioner noise? You can get mechanical noise from your amplifier, and we don't want that. Now let's talk about other kinds of noise, right? Let's talk about radio station noise. Some of you people might live in New York or in San Francisco or maybe in Hong Kong, and there's so many radio stations out there, and sometimes you're going to pick things up through unused inputs. Well, that could be because those unused inputs are just out there like radio antennas, and they have what's called just a selector switch. Remember your parents' TV set? Maybe your grandparents, possibly, and they had a selector switch, and your parents or your grandparents would have to get tuner cleaner and spray it in there and then flick it back and forth to try to get it to make contact. I remember the one that we had when I was a kid. We had to take matchbooks and shove it in there to make the knob kind of tilt so it would make contact. There's a wiper blade, and then there's the contact that it's trying to hit, and the blade would not make it, so we'd have to kind of tweak it so it would make contact and we could get that channel in. That's not what you want in a high-performance amplifier. So this is a cheap little switch up front here. Instead of that, PrimaLuna has a complete controller board up here. I mean, this is a very complicated board, and that board is charged with handling all the remote functions. In the back, you have relays. These are made in Japan by Takamasawa. They are guaranteed for 50,000 openings and closings. They are hermetically sealed Japanese relays. And so all of these inputs are shorted. They are all grounded. If you select auxiliary 1, then they are unshorted, and it allows the signal to flow in unimpeded. And it's then going to have a signal path that's going to be that long. Instead of wires traipsing back and forth a whole bunch of times, it's one wire that goes right up to the volume control from the relay. There's a little metal shield right in front of the relays to protect noise from getting into them. Oh my God, I gotta tell you this. There's a little resistor mounted right next to each relay. Those resistors are there, and I want you to look for this. If you ever go look at any other brand, you're never going to see this. Each of those resistors is charged with giving a perfect input impedance to all of your other components, like your phonostage or your CD player or your DAC, right? They like to see a nice high input impedance, and those resistors are going to supply that. Now, it only costs PrimaLuna a couple of bucks for each input. So what is it, maybe another $15, $20 to do that? But I'm telling you something. These manufacturers, they don't shave it to the nearest 20 bucks. They shave it down to the nearest dime. They are really trying to save costs in some cases, not in all, but in some cases. And you need to make sure that you are getting your money's worth. Oh my God. Let's talk about the headphone jack. How's that sound? This unit does not have a headphone jack. I've seen some other ones that do. And those headphone jacks run off of an op amp. So make sure that you find out from your dealer how the headphone jack works. If you're not into headphones, then who cares? But if you are into headphones, you need to know this. Instead of a little chip that could be $2, $3, $4, $5, PrimaLuna does this. Now understand, headphones are speakers. They are just little speakers that are right next to your ear. So if you've got the best output transformers in this amplifier, the best in the industry, why not take advantage of it? So there's a switch on the side and it operates relays and it will turn off the speaker taps and it will open up the music to go through a voltage divider network and then to the headphone jack. What does all that mean? It means it's an all-tube headphone jack. And it's amazing. People buy PrimaLunas to use them only with headphones, only, because they are that good, but not just that. See this amplifier on this side? Almost every tube amp on the market is what's called an ultra-linear design, okay? Ultra-linear is just that. It's ultra-linear. It's the most modern tube amplifier design. It's so modern it came out in the 1950s, right? But prior to that, state-of-the-art was push-pull triode. And there are people today that still much prefer the sound of triode over ultralinear because of its warm glory, right? It is so easy to listen to. The PrimaLuna Evo 300 and 400 integrated amps and power amps give you triode and ultralinear operation from a push button on the remote. Push the button, you go to triode. The volume is going to drop down by 3 decibels because you're only using 3 elements of the tube. So the volume's going to drop a little bit, so expect that. But then it's going to have this warm golden glow that so many people love. For me, I like triode when my wife and I are getting ready to go to bed. It just relaxes the house. And I also like it with some music like the Rolling Stones. It's so brash, right? Put it into triode and it just takes the edge off certain things that I wouldn't be able to even listen to them anymore if it weren't for that. Oh my God, what else did we talk about? I forgot to tell you that the wiring on this is Swiss-made, silver-plated, oxygen-free copper with a Teflon dielectric. That's important to know. The resistors that you see in the signal path here, the pink ones that are in critical positions, those are TACMAN resistors. They are custom-made, low-noise resistors, made in Japan, literally made to order. They are known for their low noise and linearity. And then let's talk just a moment about the volume control. The volume control is an Alps Blue Velvet potentiometer. Same thing here, it looks like, I think. Then there's other companies that use them. Some companies use chips, and chips can be great as long as they're using good chips. But sometimes, I'm telling you, man, I see some amps that are 8,000 bucks and they're using chips that I look up the part, and they're $2.50 each. Now, granted, they might use 2 of them or 4 of them, but still, come on, man. This is supposed to be high-end audio, right? I mean, for crying out loud. And then also, the subwoofer out. If you're into subwoofers, listen to me. A lot of people like REL subwoofers because REL subwoofers hook up with what's called a speak-on connector. So they will hook up to the speaker taps of your amplifier. So the REL is seeing the exact same signal as your speakers do. That's nice. But what if you don't have a REL and you got to hook it up with an RCA jack and you don't have the ability to use the beautiful REL speak-on connectors. PrimaLuna thought of that, and this is the coolest thing ever. The RCA jacks out for the subwoofer out. Number one, you can run them in stereo or in mono. But what's most important is this. They took the subwoofer out right off the speaker taps. So you're going to have that same kind of effect. They run it to a voltage divider network. So now your subwoofer out is going to see the same kind of signal. If you've got a REL, use the speak-on connectors, because that's the best way to go. But if you don't have a REL, just know this, that a PrimaLuna is going to give you excellent, excellent performance from hooking up other brands of subwoofers. And then let's talk about the finish of the product. I mean, I know you're not buying it to look at it, but I mean, come on, give me a break. Powder coat is fine. It is not as expensive as 5 coats of hand-rubbed lacquer. I mean, this is an amazing finish. So many of these companies, they use a cheap silver paint, and the reason they do that is to hide, it's flat silver or flat black, and it hides very gross sanding marks. You can't do that when you're doing a gloss finish like PrimaLuna does. And then PrimaLuna has the beautiful cage that it comes with. I mean, look at the remote control. I mean, the buttons are metal. That's why they make a little noise, because it's not cheap stuff. It isn't. I mean, the parts inside, I had a list of the parts in this. This is a remote that is a serviceable remote. It's not a cheap remote. It has neoprene rings around the edges. It's built like PrimaLuna. It is built to last a lifetime. I mean, nothing is left to chance, Even if you were to have a really weird situation and somebody trips over your amp, and those things happen, you have doomsday fuses on the side right there to just help protect your investment. It's meant to be used. It's meant to last a lifetime, and it's been that way now since 2003, and it's been proved to be a fully developed product that is not just the best at its price. I hate that term. Compared to anything on the market. Compared to anything on the market. And that's really why PrimaLuna uses the term, it is music illuminated. Thank you.